Welcome to a football show Monday edition here on the 440 Sports Network. That is an exhausted and tired and hardworking Zach Lyons. My name is Braden Gall. It's good to be back in the saddle after a week of watching you boys do absolute work down on the coast. Great stuff, stackingtheinbox.com. And we're going to try to add some new twists to the content that you and all the guys, Zach, put out there, which is sort of how does all the things you learned last week and all the things you reported on a gazillion different places and ways and with different voices and all kinds of great stuff. How does that change your perspective of what the Titans draft strategy should be, depth at different positions, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll get to all that stuff today on the program, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We'll also take a look at the coaching staff as it starts to fill out for Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans, and maybe some college football at the end if we get to it. Jump into the comments, and we will have a good time today. Zach, how are you, sir? Are you well rested?
No, so I was telling you off air that I had a real estate closing to go oversee for one of my clients, and last night I woke up thinking that they sold the house out from underneath us. Like I had all these weird dreams, and then on the way down they didn't have the title ready. So right after the show, that's why I'm a little dressed up a little bit more than normal.
You look good.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry to pause, but this is breaking news. My oldest dog finally gave a kiss to my youngest dog, and I just got to witness it. And my wife did not, and she's going to be totally upset.
Breaking news here on the show, of course, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Yes, stackingtheinbox.com. There is written work. There is audio, drinking with the Scouts if you want to listen to stuff of Stoney and Zach talking with bartenders about like good knee bend and stuff. There's all kinds of there's videos there. You got Teron Davenport hanging out. So make sure you go subscribe, of course, stackingtheinbox.com. This is what it brings to you if you're a Titans fan. So make sure you check that out. Football and other F words. Shout out to the Hot Read podcast guys as well. And a huge shout out to Stoney Keeley of the Sobros Network for doing great work down there with you guys as well. So go check it all out. There's tons of stuff there. We're going to kind of try to put it all into a bow today for people.
There's so much stuff down there. So we got done in the press box recording our last video that we did for the week. After the game, we're recording the video. And I was because I've been keeping up with the stats, and I told Stoney, I was like, oh, we did 7.5 hours of video and audio content. And Chrissy Ford of Sporting News, formerly of the Draft Network, also did some sporting coverage here in Nashville, goes, y'all did how much? Are you guys insane? Like, that's way too much content for the Senior Bowl. And I go, that's not enough content for the Senior Bowl. It doesn't even include all of our written stuff.
No, it doesn't, which is great, of course. And make sure you go subscribe. So really, really good stuff there. And we'll try to take all the things you learned. And what I want to know sort of about the Titans draft strategy is sort of a before and an after, because I think we all came into, or at least when the pick was slotted at number 7, and I think we all sort of felt like this is a pretty simple if or like one or the other, right? We've got a couple of great tackle prospects, a couple of great receiver prospects, 2 huge positions of need for this team moving forward. Seems like there's a win-win situation there. You can maybe include Brock Bowers into that conversation as well if you want to actually start talking about specific prospects. But in general, the philosophy and the strategy seems pretty obvious at number 7. Then there's obviously you've got a second-round pick right now. You have no third-round pick. After what you saw in Mobile for the entirety of the week and the depth of all the different positions, has anything changed in how you view the first and the second round strategies that the Titans should sort of how they should focus on those 2 picks from a strategic standpoint?
Yes, but it's not directly related to the Senior Bowl. I guess the Senior Bowl is a little bit more of a side or part of the overall picture. And I'm gonna kind of steal this from the guys that Coach Mack and Ramon Foster, who have heard some of their Senior Bowl content. So I guess it kind of is related to Senior Bowl content, but it's just best player available. And basically, to put it succinctly, this team sucks. There's nobody. You have to have like 12 studs, and they have like 2. So in the big scheme of things, you just have to take best player available. So I think all this hand-wringing and social media conversations and arguments and this or that, LT, wide receiver, you have to take a tackle, but Brian Callahan said this, so he's going to do this. You need touchdowns and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, we haven't even gotten to free agency. So all of this is kind of a moot point anyway. But at the end of the day, when you're drafting the top 10, you want a day one starter. If Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. are gone, and let's say that you have someone higher than Olu Fashanu, let's say it's a Terrion Arnold, they're going to take Terrion Arnold. They're not going to force someone to go higher. Like, that's just an example. I'm just saying that
Okay.
you're going to go best player available because you want a day one starter, and this team needs day one, year one starters so desperately. I think we've all got tunnel vision, and I understand why. Like, I totally understand why. The wide receivers have sucked for so long. The offensive line has sucked for now 2 years in a row. Totally understand it. But good teams build through the draft, and good teams don't draft for need. They draft for best player available. And I think that we have seen that they are a team that's going to roll the dice, play the board. And I think they're going to play the board. And I think that's what they're going to do. And they're looking for fast, instinctive, tough players.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to fit that mold. And I'm not necessarily saying that some of these players in the top 10 are projected to go at 7 don't at a position of need. I'm just saying that those players could be gone. Those players could be, get injured at some point. At the end of the day, if you're saying, well, I'm team wide receiver, I'm team left tackle, I think you should be on team best player available.
I think that's right. And if you have any questions for Zach, of course, specifics about players, please jump into the comments. Zach's gonna take a talking about the Senior Bowl break for a couple of days. So this is our last chance to ask him right now about this stuff. I look here. Let me give you an example of how maybe my perception maybe tweaked a little bit. For example, and this, I'm not 100% sold on this yet, but just an example. I think that I am more comfortable with the offensive line options deeper into the first round than maybe I was at the beginning of last week. Let's just say hypothetically. Like, I'm a little bit more comfortable with, if you were to trade back hypothetically at anywhere from 14 to 25, let's just say real broadly, right? You trade back, you add a pick. And again, I think Terrion Arnold's a really nice player. If they draft him number 7, I'll be disappointed. I think he was a little too handsy and got too many penalties for 7th overall, but made a lot of plays, good athlete, not worthy at 7 in my opinion. But Fuago from
just an example. Don't take it so literal, Braden. Like, I'm not allowed to take your stuff literal. Can't take my stuff literal and try to throw it back in my face.
All you do is take all my shit literally. Fuaga, for example, at offensive tackle from Oregon State. Obviously, the top center there down in Mobile is Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, a guy that looks like sort of an early 20s pick. That's the top center off the board. That's going to be a guaranteed starter for like 12 years in the NFL. Yeah. And I've seen as many as 9 different linemen projected in the first round. I want to ask you about Tyler Guyton, who was down there, probably the highest rated player at the Senior Bowl from a draft prospect standpoint, probably the first Senior Bowl player off the board. Had a fairly consistent week, but
maybe going into this, but I don't think out of this he will be.
Well, I mean, he's the only one that's down there that's even projected. I mean, now that's true. Mitchell, the corner out of Toledo, is another guy. That's
Fuaga this morning, I read a mock draft, for example, a mock draft this morning that had Fuaga higher than Guyton. So, and I always kind of thought those two kind of like interchange, but I think if you talk about a guy that may have hurt his stock a little bit while other people helped their stock a lot, Guyton would be the guy that
it's all relative.
Like, still going in the first round, but I don't know if he's not on solid footing, if you will.
Yeah, and I've seen 9 offensive linemen, up to 9 or even 10 offensive linemen, sort of as top 32 prospects, not mock drafts, but like top 30 prospects,
right? Which
means, and ultimately, the question was about the second tier, right? We trust Joe Alt, we trust Fashanu. We can have some debates probably about J.C. Latham, but like there was questions about some of these other guys in that second tier, and it does feel like, for example, this week of practice established a few of those guys as quality players. Now, additionally, with Bill Callahan now as the offensive line coach for the Tennessee Titans, I would assume that a situation like Broderick Jones last year, where the Steelers drafted a guy who just is not a dog at all, like I would assume that Bill Callahan helps
draft in the 4th round,
helps you avoid those. Well, am I missing? Who's the guy that was first round? Am I wrong about that? Who am I thinking, from Oklahoma? Or okay, I'll go back and
DeJuan Jones isn't. There was DeJuan Jones and Broderick Jones. The Jones that they got at the Cleveland Browns was a 4th rounder. So I don't know which one it was, but I mean, he was drafted in the 4th round. He was not drafted in the 1st.
Sit tight real fast here, and I'll
The other one went.
I'll pull up the draft.
Can't remember where he went, but
Vamp.
I would say this. So to your point,
Pittsburgh drafted Broderick Jones 14th overall.
Yeah,
in the
DeJuan
first round.
Jones is who the Browns drafted, and that's who Bill Callahan. That's why I'm saying that's who Bill Callahan with the Browns got to be a starting very good. I think he was right tackle out of the 4th round.
Yeah. Yes. What I'm
supporting what you're saying. I'm supplementing what you're saying.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm
like using Bill Callahan.
What I'm ultimately landing on here is with Bill Callahan's expertise, you should be able to avoid like the whiff. The guy who's just like you should be able to parse out if there are 9 graded out first round offensive linemen. I would assume that like you should be able to pick out the 2 that you think just clearly aren't it, that don't hit, right? And because Callahan should give you a level of expertise at this position that hopefully you haven't had in the Isaiah Wilson era of Tennessee Titans drafting in the first round. So if we were going to say, hey, how did your strategy change? I think it's that I still love offensive line with the first pick, but I like that pick maybe back in the first round a bit. If you can add some draft capital, of course, that means a million other things have to happen. You have to be able to have a partner, et cetera, et cetera. But it also, I think you pair that with the fact that quarterback is a wildly unpredictable game right now in the first round, and that there's a chance somebody likes somebody at 7 that falls to 7. And I just think when you package those 2 things together, I'm even higher on trade back, which is kind of always my default setting, which is best available and trade back.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got into this, and I'm on the Music City Audible this week. And I got into this with Mello. A lot of people are like, well, he just can't. He's not the kingmaker. You know, Bill Callahan's not a kingmaker. You need to get Joe Alt in the first round. I'm like, well, everybody has said that he's this kingmaker. We know that he is somewhat of a kingmaker for these offensive linemen, and he could take competent, hardworking offensive linemen like Jones in the 4th round, which we saw, like Wyatt Teller, who just about 3 or 4 years ago was on his way out of the league and now has 3 Pro Bowls because of Bill Callahan's teaching. So you can't have it both ways, right? Like I feel like these people are like, you can't turn around and say at the beginning, man, Bill Callahan would be the best hire because he's the best offensive line coach in the league, and then turn around and say, well, you can't make Patrick Paul anything because Patrick Paul, you know, blah, 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 blah. He's a 2nd round. Dude, Patrick Paul's pretty good, and he's already at the O-line masterminds, and what he's been working on at the O-line masterminds with Duke Manyweather, he's one of 18 prospects, he put into action this week. He also put into action the coaching points that he was given. Patrick Paul in the 2nd round is a good pick for the Tennessee Titans at a position of need that may not be a player that you want. But when you have Bill Callahan, that really raises the floor or lowers the risk, however you want to look at it. You can either raise the floor of a prospect or lower the risk of a prospect because you have Bill Callahan. You can't start backtracking now that he's here and now nobody wants to draft your favorite prospect in the first round that he's not even good anymore, that Bill Callahan's not that good. Bill Callahan could turn. Listen, the Eagles gave up on Andre Dillard. But when Andre Dillard played for the Eagles, there's a reason why all of us wanted them to trade for Andre Dillard last year. There's a reason that we all thought until we started seeing him at training camp that Andre Dillard was going to be good. Because when he did play for the Eagles, he was good. Maybe he was really a C- player, a D player that got brought up to a B- to a C+ player because of coaching. But that's what good coaching does.
And supporting
good coaching can elevate some players, and then they go somewhere where they have bad coaching and they're bad. And so I think when you look at it all, that I think Bill Callahan provides you flexibility. When you go into the draft, you want as much flexibility as possible. And that, because things don't go your way in the NFL draft 9 times out of 10. You're going to have to be flexible. A guy that you thought was going to be there is not going to be there. A guy.
Yep.
So it's all about mitigating risks and mitigating disappointment. And Bill Callahan can do a lot. If you were to ask me to build out a big board, Joe Alt, number 1 for this Tennessee Titans team. If you were to ask me what I think the Tennessee Titans have Joe Alt, I think they have 3 wide receivers over him and then Joe Alt. And I don't know if Olu Fashanu is the 4th guy on the top of that. Like, I don't know if Olu Fashanu is going in the top 10 right now. And that's just my overall feelings. And that has nothing to do with the talent or what I think he is as a prospect. But I don't know if the Tennessee Titans have. I wonder how many players between Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu do they have?
Yeah,
and I could almost say that I kind of feel like maybe a guy like Talisa Fuaga could be ahead of Olu Fashanu because that dude is fucking violent. That dude was awesome this week.
Oregon State's offensive line, one of the most dominant, well-coached, and developed physical groups in the entire country. It led to them having almost a shot at the Pac-12 championship game last year. And, of course, it led to Jonathan Smith, the head coach at Oregon State, going on to Michigan State. They're very well-coached players at Oregon State. And so, I again, this is would you agree if I just said, look, I think the top of the offensive line class, in particular tackle, maybe a little bit deeper after last week, including center and interior guard, like just a little bit deeper in general, maybe than we expected. Some of those guys proved themselves last week. Fair?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I look at it, and I think a lot of people, I don't know if I'd feel as confident in what I'm saying as if it wasn't for the Bill Callahan X factor. I think there's really, outside of the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, I think offensive line is your most important position coach. But I also think that Bill Callahan and Jeff Stoutland are the 2 most important coaches. They're just as important as head coaches in some instances. Like, it'll be very interesting to see what Kevin Stefanski and the offensive line looks like without Bill Callahan. You don't see a lot of fans get upset that their offensive line coach is leaving. And like they're lighting candles in Cleveland, hoping to bring him back. I mean, that's how good he is. So I think that I am with you. I think that, I don't think Guyton had the best week, but if you trade back and you land with Tyler Guyton and a couple extra picks and you got him with Bill Callahan, boom, there you go. And you pick up J.C. Latham. You pick up Talisa Fuaga. You pick up Amarius Mims, who I'm not really particularly high on, but hey, Bill Callahan, I don't care. As long as Bill Callahan's here, I don't care.
Yeah. Ed Henry says, I'm more comfortable taking an O-line later because of Bill Callahan and his chances to develop a second-tier tackle. That's exactly what we're saying, Ed. And I agree with you.
Logically, I do think like, there's no doubt in my mind. You were to ask me, gun to my head, do you want Joe Alt or the field? I want Joe Alt.
Yes. And the question is, do you still have to pick in the first round to get a second-tier tackle? And I think you do. You do, because I think Alt's the top tier, and then I think there's like 6 guys. And the good news is there's like, and then you could probably include the top center in that conversation. Maybe a guard, probably not an option, but the number 1 center at 22, that's a pretty good value pick for Will Levis. So ultimately, let's move to the second round then, because I think the first round pick, I think we've kind of hit that. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, by the way, buildkg.com. Sinkers Beverages.
And some of these will go in the second round, right? Like, I mean,
maybe, yeah.
Like, there's not going to be 10 offensive linemen that go in the first round. People say that all the time about a certain position group, and then it never happens. We got to be realistic. There's only 32 spots. I don't think 10 offensive linemen are going in the first.
Well, this is what ties directly into the quarterbacks, and we don't want to spend a ton of time on the quarterbacks because the Titans aren't necessarily in the market for it, but it does tie into what could be available or teams that want to fly up to the board and get somebody. Like, I think Mims and the kid out of Duke, by the way, are the 2 offensive linemen that I could see falling out of the first round. I do not think that Powers Johnson is falling out of the first round. I think the Oregon center will be a first round pick. And I think there's probably 6 tackles you can almost lock in as first round picks. But again, to your point, the draft is unpredictable. Things happen. Players fall. How many names did we talk about with this Titans team over the last 5 years that ended up falling out? I mean, Harold Landry, Rashaan Evans, like there's all kinds of guys that fell out. Adoree Jackson, Christian Fulton. How could I forget Christian Fulton?
Yeah, because the team that should have took Christian Fulton in the first took Isaiah Wilson in the second.
Yeah, that's true.
Or the first.
So ultimately, and again, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston. By the way, we had a great reminder to those of you who were not a part of the show last year. Many of you were, and we do appreciate your support. Awesome draft party last year with Sinkers Beverages at their great offices in Wedgwood, Houston. We are working on some stuff for you folks for this year. I just want to float that out there. Sinkers Beverages, great liquor store in East Nashville, Sister Store Bluegrass, sponsor of F Words, up there in Hendersonville. Go shop and buy your booze there. You can Uber Eats and search Sinkers Beverages. They'll deliver the booze right to your house, Zach.
They drive so you can drink.
But we got some stuff planned for you. So we're working. We're in the shop working on what could be available for you guys for the NFL draft coming up this year. Hayden says, I also think it's worth noting that the O-line shined and wide receiver did not shine so much on the depth pieces in Mobile. That is my next question, because the second round pick has felt like the quote unquote wide receiver pick for the Titans for a while. Now I want to float two theories. One, and I know you floated this on the Thursday episode, which is that there could be some, or no, this was actually stacking the, I've gotten all your content confused, Zach. This was, I think, you and Stoney talking, drinking with scouts about defense potentially for the Titans, defensive line in particular, at the top of the second round. So I want to get your thoughts on that strategy change or tweak, best available potentially. But also the wide receiver group, outside of Marvin Harrison and maybe the other two, Odunze and Neighbors, it doesn't feel like receiver in the first round is the right play, but it also doesn't feel like there's a ton of guys. Like, how did you feel about the depth at receiver from Mobile now, looking at the entire big board?
Well, one of the drinking, I think our first episode of Drinking with the Scouts, we talked about how we don't think the wide receiver depth is as good as what everybody thought it was. And I think everybody thinks that the second round is going to be littered with really good wide receivers. I think your second round is A.D. Mitchell and nobody. There's going to be a lot of there's a lot of wide receivers with a wild variance of skill sets, of play, of ceilings and floors. There's going to be a lot of hit and misses in the second round. Now, I do think that a guy like Roman Wilson or a guy like Jamari Thrash could sneak into the second round. And everybody's going to be like, where did those names come from? And they came from the Senior Bowl. It's like when Jaden Reed jumped up into the second round for the Green Bay Packers. Nobody was really expecting that. And he has good tape, good production, put together a really good Senior Bowl, a so-so combine. I mean, he had some highs and lows from the combine, but I knew he was going to interview well. But that's a guy that just suddenly popped up in the second round, and look what he's doing now. He's been used in all kinds of different ways. He was scoring touchdowns like crazy. He's a really good young player that played in year one and round two, but he wasn't on anybody's radar unless you went to the Senior Bowl and you paid attention to our coverage.
Yeah. Darnell writes the other one, by the way, as an example of names that can fly up the board. Last year, it would be Jaden Reed and Darnell Wright for sure.
Right. And so I look at it and I go, okay, Jamari Thrash, and I think that Roman Wilson did the most to be that second round guy where everybody's kind of like, whoa, I did not hear there's when I do my PFF mock draft, he's there in the fourth round.
Right.
That's a reach. It's not going to be a reach. Those guys know what they're doing. And I think with the right fit, it's all going to be dependent on fit. If the Titans were to draft Ladd McConkey, I don't know if it's going to be a good fit really or not. But if the Los Angeles Rams drafted Ladd McConkey, they're getting 5 Super Bowls. Like they're just going to have
these guys. It's a lot of Super Bowls for a third round receiver.
Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Ladd McConkey are just going to go crazy. But I think, like square ups and Tyler Coleman, Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy, I think they both have some big negatives to their game. They could be, but if they go to the right round, like I feel like, remember how everybody was really, and this including me, was really high on Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, right? Yep. And I think Cedric Tillman's Keon Coleman, Jalen Hyatt is Xavier Worthy. You're not going to hear those names in year one of their rookie year. Now, they may get better, but I feel like those are two good comps for those players that everybody's like, well, the Titans got to draft them in the second round, and then they keep falling. And then you kind of figure out, well, they're not that good in the pros, and they have a long way to go. I was totally wrong about Cedric Tillman because I thought Cedric Tillman was going to be a stud.
I think ultimately I agree with your broad point, which is that there might be a couple of names that get drafted early in the second round, but where the Titans are picking and where in theory they would have been picking in the third round is actually a far more reasonable target for a wide receiver. If you look at Roman Wilson, he's about top 75 in most mocks and most rankings,
and that will shoot up.
Same thing with Thrash. So if they're in that 75 range, well, that's fringe early third, late second. That means your sort of margin for error is then probably 15 or 20 picks either direction, depending on who likes you or who doesn't. But that really, honestly, the thing that I would have changed is if you're not going to go wide receiver at 7, that really I don't think you should be efforting to gain more equity with a trade back or something of that nature. But really, the top of the 3rd round is where you should be targeting wide receiver, not the top of the 2nd round, which is it seems like that's how you feel. So with that in mind,
sort of. I mean, I'd rather them trade their 2nd round pick than their 1st round pick. Get the 2nd round pick, and then go from there. I think your two best known names at pick 38. If you just want known names from someone, you would look at AD Mitchell, and I could be talked into Malachi Corley if AD Mitchell's gone. If you are wanting the the surprises in the 2nd round, I would say Roman Wilson and Jamari Thrash. I would think there's your surprise because I think Ladd McConkey is going to go in the 2nd round. I think everybody kind of knows he's going to go in the 2nd round. I think Ricky Pearsall could sneak in there.
He's a really good player. He's a good player.
he got bodied. He was on the ground like 2 or 3 times day 1, and then he disappeared day 3.
But this is why I think all these guys. This is why I think all these guys are 3rd round grades relative to maybe other years. I think Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell.
I agree. I don't think 2nd round is going to be like littered with all these wide receivers taken like everybody thinks. I think everybody's totally. And I think if you take Xavier Legette in the 2nd round, you're asking for a lot of hurt. But
he is so hard to like. He's one of those guys that I loved watching the entire season. The burst at his size, 225 pounds, is incredible. But like, there's some flaws there to the game. So we'll see. And this is ultimately, we're at the very beginning of this process. We got the combine coming up. We're going to have all kinds of stuff to sort of break down. But this is the first big chunk of data that we've got on outside of the tape itself. This is the first kind of big chunk of data. So it means you have to make adjustments. And I think the adjustment for me is there's more depth in the 1st round at O-line and less depth in the 2nd round at receiver. That's my 2 kind of big takeaways that are this early in the process before the Super Bowl, of course, takes place.
I would say if you want some advice from me, I would I always buy Dane Brugler's The Beast in his big board. And I also look at the movement of players on Daniel Jeremiah's, not their placements, how much they move up and down. Because what Daniel Jeremiah's big board is telling you is that if a player's moving down or moving up, that means that is not based really on his evaluation. It's based more on what he is hearing. So I'm again, if you focus too much on, whoa, I can't believe he's got, Bo Nix at 15. Yeah. But if you look at the previous one, he has him at 5. There's a reason that he dropped down to 15.
Well, and now I'm seeing Michael Penix and Bo Nix, and I agree with you completely. And now I'm seeing Bo Nix and Michael Penix in the 2nd round. So
don't pay attention to. I wouldn't pay attention to Daniel Jeremiah's mock drafts, or not to say they're not good or anything, but I would say that looking at the big board and how it moves for Daniel Jeremiah is much more important than what his mock draft really says.
I completely agree. And Brugler, by the way, has Corley, the Western Michigan receiver, right? He's got him as one of the top receivers at the Senior Bowl. Him and Wilson,
he had a good
Wilson
week
as well.
Uninspiring day 1, but day 2, he had a couple of moments where I'm like, oh, that is the Debo comp. Like I see the Debo comp now, and I really like what I saw out of Malachi Corley. So I can be talked into him.
Is he as thick?
I still would have AD Mitchell. Yeah, he's thick. He's built like a running back.
Okay, good. Trey says,
I don't know. Like how thick he was compared to Debo as off the top of my head as a prospect, but that dude looks like a wide back, like the wide receiver running back.
Trey says, does a week at the Senior Bowl with pads on, one-on-ones, etc., or a week at the Combine carry more weight for you from a scouting POV? My quick short answer would be tape 1. One-on-ones and Senior Bowl maybe 2, and then Combine 3 if I had to rank those 3. But tape is always number 1.
Tape's 1. I would say that Senior Bowl is 2, or Combine is 2A, Senior Bowl is 2B. Okay. But for me, because what you're looking at the Senior Bowl is not really the top of the top prospects. You're looking at the guys that are like fringe day 1 to day 3 players, and that does a lot. It does a lot more for the player than it does for the process itself, I guess. So those specific players, if all the Combine players were at the Senior Bowl, that'd be a totally different story.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think that Combine still reigns supreme because the meetings mean more, the interviews mean more, the kind of stuff that kind of happens behind the scenes means more.
Yep.
And of course, the testing and how they handle that stuff.
Well, and Quinyon Mitchell, the corner from Toledo, for a guy like that, and the kid, kid out of New Hampshire, the running back out of New Hampshire, what it benefits, it benefits the smaller school players to be put into a bigger pond. It absolutely benefits those guys. And so I think, and that's another thing I want to ask you about is running backs. I think there's a lot of really good running backs that if the Titans want to target on day 3,
holy crap.
I think this is a good day 3 draft for running backs. I think there's a lot of depth and talent at that position. We can touch on the quarterbacks here for a second if you want. And I look, Joe Milton stock down, colored me just totally shocked and surprised. Spencer Rattler, better than his because he played behind a Tennessee Titans like SEC offensive line for 2 years. Of course, he's better now that he's got offensive linemen in front of him. And I think
he was the best quarterback this week.
Ultimately, Penix and Nix, if they were to fall late first round or early second, this is where again we get into the Titan strategy in the second round, which I think I'm coming around on a high level defensive player because those are the guys that tend to fall. Now, if you go receiver at 7, maybe there's a high level offensive lineman that falls, but I don't like taking that risk. I like the idea of a high level defensive player, whether it's corner, linebacker, maybe the best linebacker in the draft. Who knows? Sometimes they do fall into the second round. Jack Campbell, for example, or last year, or a defensive lineman. I think there's a lot of intrigue to the Titans keeping that door open very much at the top of the second round.
I will say this: how high could Rattler or McCarthy go up? We'll see McCarthy's testing and all that kind of stuff. But I think I'm not saying Rattler's going in the first, but Rattler's going to be a guy that's going to go a lot higher than what people think. And that's a guy who improved his stock at the Senior Bowl. 2 other guys you mentioned, one, Quinyon Mitchell, definitely going in the first round. Jackson Power Johnson's definitely going in the first round. You cannot convince me otherwise unless they come back and just test piss poor and take dumps in the middle of their interviews, like literally pull their pants down and take dumps. That's the only way these guys are not going in the first round.
It's wonderful imagery.
But also another guy like Darius Robinson from the kid out of Missouri. I've talked all year about the Missouri defense and how much fun they were watching, how I was choosing Missouri to win some games that I didn't think they would, and how I'm sitting there watching them take LSU to the limit. Chris Abrams-Drain had a good year. Or a good Senior Bowl. Cody Schrader had a good Senior Bowl, but nobody did more than Darius Robinson to help their stock. That's a guy that if he's not in your mock draft in the first round by the end of this cycle, by your final mock draft, if he's not in the first round, your draft's missing at least one. He's one player wrong because I think he's going in the first.
This is what I love. I'm so excited about this draft for some strange reason. Darius Robinson, by the way, I talked to him at SEC Media Days here in Nashville before the season started. Like that, they're incredibly mature football players at Missouri, and I think it led directly to their success this year. Very smart, thoughtful guys, and I think that helped. But yeah, he's already mocked into most first rounds right now, back into the first round. So again, that's a guy that could be available beginning of the second round. That absolutely
is. If he's there at 38. I think you can't pass him up on 38. That guy dominated at least a few times. Every type of offensive lineman he went up against, he was a beast. That the scouts were all walking around with boners all damn day because of Darius Robinson, almost all week. It was not safe for work.
I do want to chime in with Square Up about Rattler and McCarthy. So McCarthy right now is being projected anywhere from top 15 to late first round. Rattler's significantly behind that, but certainly improved his stock. Here's what I would say. Both of them are high pedigree recruits coming out of high school. Rattler was a 5-star kid who was a starter right away at Oklahoma, transferred to South Carolina, certainly played behind a piss-poor offensive line at South Carolina, but made progress in his time in Columbia. I think McCarthy, people ask all the time. I get asked this a lot from people. Is JJ McCarthy like better than we think or worse than we think, or what's the deal? And I'm like, I think he's just is what we think he is. And I think he's got a lot of really sound tools, a lot of really good skills. But I don't think a lot of people say, well, Michigan underutilized him this year. And a lot of people will say, well, it's because he's not that good. And so I think he's just sort of this middle of the pack, of this particular class quarterback. I don't think he's a guy who takes over games. I don't think he has nearly the skill set that Will Levis has from a size and arm strength standpoint and any of that stuff. So to me, I think McCarthy kind of is a late first round pick. He falls. And I think during the draft process is going to fall. a little bit, and then I think Rattler kind of slowly works his way up from like 6th rounder to like 3rd rounder, if that makes sense. That's how I.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what the combine does for both those guys, the interview process and all that kind of stuff. There's something about JJ McCarthy I really liked, and then towards the end of the year, of the college year, I didn't like him anymore, and I like him even less. And I think that if someone were to draft him in the 1st round, you're looking to get fired. Like, that's kind of how I feel.
I agree.
I mean, but that's just me.
So you are checking scouts' crotches for scouting purposes. Here's what I want you to do from now on.
Well, I'm just saying I couldn't ignore it. I mean,
yeah.
you
Well, no, I think you should actively check crotches from now on. I think you should bring you need to bring a little measurement, and it needs to be quarter chub, half chub, 3/4 chub, full chub, and that's the measurement for how excited
you are. They were engorged chub.
fully engorged. Chubb, what about Mason Smith? You missed the second A there, Tyler. In the 2nd round, he'll be removed. He's a defensive lineman from LSU, tore his ACL 2 years ago. Really, really like elite talent. Maybe not the same player since the injury, so that is going to be interesting to check through medical evaluations with him. But otherwise, I think there's give me some quick other observations here, because I think running back, really, really interesting, deep. I think there's lots of options in the 5th, 6th, 7th round there for good running backs that were down there at the Senior Bowl. Linebacker, was there anybody even worth targeting at the top of the 2nd round to fill a need for this team at all?
No. I mean, these linebackers that were down here, I mean, there were some, they showed out at the game. They must have read everything and heard everything we talked about, because they were flying around everywhere. But I would not be touching a linebacker in the 2nd round of this draft based on what I saw at the Senior Bowl. I think guys you could see that sneak in to the 2nd round that maybe you're going to see on your PFF mock drafts in the 4th round are guys like Max Melton out of Rutgers, Nehemiah Pritchett, Cam Hart, and Chris Abrams-Drain. All have a chance to be like kind of like that back end of the 2nd round where you're kind of like, wonder what they saw in Chris Abrams-Drain, because I saw him in a 4th round draft pick on PFF. Basically, if you ever want me to grade a mock draft and you have one of those 4 guys in that mock draft in the 4th round of Tennessee Titans, you're getting an A+ for me, because those guys really, really showed out. They were great all week long. They were great from opening bell to closing bell for 3 days of a week, and then also in the final game. I thought they were awesome, and I encourage you all to go listen to the Day 3 podcast of the OTP covering the Senior Bowl, and they interview Max Melton, and you guys are going to be like, that dude is a Tennessee Titan. Denard Wilson have him in the All-Pro by like year 2. That dude is legit, and all these guys, what I liked about them the most was that they were physical, and they lined up against all kinds of wide receivers in press coverage, and they dominated those wide receivers when they were in press coverage more often than not. And that was a total difference from last year's Senior Bowl 1v1s and team drills with wide receivers and defensive backs.
There's also so many names that I think did pretty well this week that, again, if the Titans had an early 3rd round pick, you could possibly look at whether it's Tyke Smith, the safety out of Georgia, Braden Fisk, the defensive tackle out of Florida State. There's just so many names.
Was really good this week.
There's so many names that I think Tavondre Sweat, if he gets out of the 1st round, could be there in the 2nd round. I think he's, again, not a 3rd round guy. But again, you start looking at Chris Braswell is another name. The edge rusher for Alabama could be there in the 2nd round potentially as a target. You mentioned Darius Robinson. There could be both corners actually from Missouri could be available there as well. And then you've got both Louisville kids, the corner Brownlee and the receiver Thrash. Both could be guys.
I love
target.
Jamari Thrash. But so Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I don't think he goes in the 2nd. He's a little thin, but that dude will stay in your hip pocket and annoy the shit out of you. Like, it was insane how much he got under the skin of his wide receivers, and he got an interception in the game. But, like, he is on your hip, and if he loses a little bit of ground, he has great makeup speed. I'm not sold that he's a 2nd rounder, but that's a guy who, I mean, the cornerbacks were fantastic this year. Very, very good.
Peyton Wilson is a great undervalued linebacker. That's the guy who basically made every single possible human play that a football player could make at NC State. If you want to, he may not grade really well or test really well, but if you want the tape to outshine everything else, go look at Peyton Wilson.
He should test well. He's very fast. but I didn't feel like he made a lot of plays this week. Another guy that kind of like I think it also showed, and I can't remember if it was Zero Lines Matt Miller's mock draft, but he fell very far in his Laiatu.
Yeah.
A lot of people acted like he had a really good week, and he really didn't. He's very toolsy, but he wasn't very quick, and he injured himself this week. Like, he had another injury to his knee, so don't know how severe it is, but just very interesting that he had a very underwhelming week, and he ended up getting injured again.
I don't think that was a bad week for him in general. I don't think he was there, but Edgerrin Cooper at A&M is a guy that plays sort of a traditional weak side linebacker in like a 4-3 scheme. That might not be what we want to see from this team, but that's a guy that I think second, third round is going to be very, very talented. J.D. Bertrand seemed like the best linebacker maybe there for the Senior Bowl, but he's not.
I think he was during the week, but I guess not. He didn't really do it for me, and I think a lot of people liked his leadership during the week and how he organized the defense. But I thought during the game he didn't show up, and guys like Cedric Gray, Tyrese Knight, Jackson Sermon, Nathaniel Watson, those guys showed up during the game.
Okay.
And I would say Jackson Sermon probably made plays on the ball during the week as well. He was probably the only linebacker that was really like, oh, well, that guy's good.
Yeah. So I think there's lots of good linebacker options in like the fourth round. Corner maybe in the second round. Defensive line maybe in the second round.
Really need a third round pick in this draft.
Yeah, you do.
Just want to say that.
Yeah, you do.
But the good news is that everybody's deathly afraid of picking in the 6th and 7th round this year and the 5th. They want picks in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's the hubbub, the Senior Bowl scuttlebutt, if you will, is that everybody wants pick in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And so if you're there in the 2nd round and you want some picks, I think you could get more this year than what you gave up last year for Will Levis.
So move back from top of the 2nd to middle of the 2nd, get yourself a 3rd, call it a day, get your receiver in the 3rd round, get your corner or your defensive lineman, your front 7 player in the 2nd round, come back and get a linebacker or maybe a corner in the 4th round, and then get your running back later on in the draft as well. So there you go.
I do need to give a shout out to Kingsley Eguakon, a Florida center who had a dominant week. Charles Turner the third, CT3. He had a really, really good week. When you're talking about centers, those are two guys. And Dominic Puny, who played both guard and center. That's another guy to keep on your radar because Tennessee Titans do need offensive linemen right now.
Center in the 4th or 5th round also seems like a very real possibility.
Got to get picks, man. They need them.
No, I know. Jerry Rice's kid, Brendan Rice, had a pretty good week. He's kind of in that same range as Roman Wilson in terms of overall
physical and coachable. So. That's the thing that I took away from him is that he's extremely coachable, and he will take what you tell him and put it into practice right there on the field. It won't take him a couple of tries. You only have to tell him once.
I wonder where he got that from.
I don't know, because apparently he just started building a relationship with his dad in the last 5 years. So, it was interesting. I don't know the whole story behind it, but
you still can't fake genetic makeup. That is for sure. And I'm not talking about athletic ability. I'm talking about the focus and the work ethic and all that other stuff. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, of course. BuildKG.com is the website for Kingston Group. Make sure you check out their socials as well, at the Kingston Group, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. The website it'll show you phenomenal work that they do. They're a nose-to-tail operation. They will take care of whatever needs you have from a home buying or selling situation, remodeling. They do the entire design work in-house, so they kind of take you from start to finish. You don't need any outside contractors. None of this like 2/3 of the way through the job. They're going to walk out. No, they are from start to finish. Make sure you go check out the Kingston Group, of course, and our lovely and amazing friends, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Okay, the coaching staff. Nick Holes looks like he is going to be the offensive coordinator. The Jacksonville passing game coordinator was at UNLV as an OC just 2 years ago. This feels a little bit like a loyalty hire, but we'll get to that in a second. Denard Wilson, defensive backs coach for Baltimore. Most everybody rave reviews on him being the defensive coordinator for Brian Callahan. As we mentioned, Bill Callahan coming in to be the offensive line coach. 2 former Titans. Steven Jackson is your defensive backs coach. He was formerly at Atlanta, played for this team. And then Frank Bush is going to be the linebackers coach also at Atlanta. Tyke Tolbert's the one that we're going to get to because it seems like that's the one people are really excited about, is going to coach the wide receivers. He was at Chicago last year. Let me get started first with just the top of the pyramid here, which is Brian Callahan, Nick Holes, and Denard Wilson. All three are in their roles for the first time in the NFL, play calling for both Wilson and Callahan. So just your thoughts in general when it comes to the three guys at the top of the coaching pyramid and very inexperienced, but also a lot of relationships and been around football for a long time.
So what is the cutoff for you in terms of inexperience, or define inexperience for me?
Well, so they're inexperienced in their role, right? First time coordinator for both of them, and first time head coach.
Well, except for Nick Holz, but first time in the NFL.
In the NFL, sorry, yeah. As I said, he was the offensive coordinator at UNLV. Mountain West is exactly like the AFC West. So all three guys, like Wilson and Callahan, calling plays for the first time. They just never have done it before. Doesn't mean they're not going to be brilliant. It just means they haven't done it. And all three in their role for the first time. So they are supported by lots of veteran pieces that they've hired. But in general, it doesn't mean they're not going to be great. It doesn't mean anything. These are just sort of the facts.
Well, I mean, I just wonder, because like 17 years in football seems like it's just a throwaway of not enough experience. But
no,
hey, everybody wanted 10-year Bobby Sloak to be the head coach, but 17-year Nick Holz can't be the offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying that you're saying that, but that's the general sentiment out there. Is like, where is this cutoff that? If you look at the resumes of Bobby Sloak and Nick Holz before they even got to the offensive coordinator position, before last year for Bobby Sloak, first off, they kind of look alike. But second off, and they kind of talk alike. They do not have great interview skills. But
as I said, they've been around the game a long time,
right? I mean, like if you look at the resumes, Nick Holz has a better resume. It's just that Bobby Sloak gets the benefit of the doubt because he's with Kyle Shanahan. Which I just find that it's just very convenient. It's very lazy analysis. And again, I'm not saying that you are doing that. I am saying the general sentiment is like, well, he's inexperienced, but he's got 17 years of pretty good football pedigree that they're all just thrown away because they just want to poo-poo because it seems like he hired his bud, which guess what? Everybody hires their bud in the NFL. We just got done defending Mike Vrabel for hiring his buds. And again, you can't have it both ways, people. You can't say Brian Callahan is my number one choice because he could build a really great staff and then start abandoning ship because he didn't get the guy that you really thought he was going to get or get the guy that you wanted. He got his top choice in both these, right? Denard Wilson was clearly his top choice for defensive coordinator. Nick Holz was clearly his top choice for offensive coordinator. He got his dad. He's gotten, I think he's let Denard Wilson build out his staff with mainly his input because of the times that he's been with Frank Bush twice. Denard Wilson has. He's been with Steven Jackson once. Steven Jackson also has scouting background. I mean, like, to me, it's just like you look at all this stuff and I'm like, Nick Holz in the big realm of things to hire is not something I'm really concerned about from an experience standpoint because he has 17 years of NFL experience and he's not calling the plays.
Yeah, he also doesn't have to do it. So what I was going to say is if you're going to have one of the two coordinator hires be a loyalty veteran experience, because I think he does, to your point, he's been around the game a very long time. I mean, Tyke Tolbert, honestly, for a wide receiver, has been around the game a long time coaching receivers. So what's interesting to me is if you're going to have the young, up-and-coming, hyped-up guy, it should be the guy who's not, like, it should be the other guy. And Callahan, you hire Brian Callahan, and he's calling plays. I assume that was part of the process in the interview, that he was going to call plays, and it was going to be his offense. It makes the offensive coordinator role far less important than the defensive coordinator role. So you absolutely want the guy who is the red-hot sort of up-and-comer that people love, that want to be around. Hey, this is the guy that you stole. You want that guy to be opposite of Callahan, number one, first and foremost.
Right.
Because it does not matter as much about the offensive coordinator.
You just hired Brian Callahan, 2019 Brian Callahan, to be your offensive coordinator. This is Zach Taylor hiring Brian Callahan back in 2019. And I get it. Well, Brian Callahan was a position coach for a really long time. But I think some people kind of overinflate what that is versus what you have to do now. And what he is doing here is the role of a passing game coordinator, right? Like what he is doing here, because we assume right now that Justin Otten is still run game coordinator and running backs coach until we're told otherwise. So they already have a run game coordinator. They have Bill Callahan. And now they have a passing game coordinator / offensive coordinator, even though he doesn't have that title. Essentially his job is to be Brian Callahan and deliver Brian Callahan's messages to the players, to the coaches, when Brian Callahan is doing something else that a head coach is required to do that doesn't allow him to be in a particular meeting room. And that's what he's doing. So to do that, you have to but you hire someone that you trust and that you know can communicate the way you do. And what people may not know about Nick Holtz is that, I talked about it in here a few times, that Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor met in spring break of 2005. Okay. They met way back in the day and they became friends, and they did these football camps and summer camps together. And they hosted them and taught people. Cliff Kingsbury was there. Nick Holtz was there. And we know Nick Holtz was already with Brian Callahan as quarterback and receiver at their high school. So they were all in the same group. It's maybe not the Shanahan sexy tree that you're looking for, but there sure seems to be a pretty good tree and pedigree being built here. And you're out on the ground floor. But I mean, they're not as good looking as the Shanahan tree for the most part. But
I think your ground floor line is really important here, because I think to tie together your best available comment from earlier in the show, which is this team does not have superstars. At players, they need superstars, and you need to have 10 or 12 or 14 of them to win big in the NFL, and they have a couple. They need a lot more dogs, like big time stars. I think I said that in the middle of the season, and I was like, I just don't see it, guys. I just don't see the dogs. And so also you have a coaching staff, while there are some veteran pieces here supporting the top of the pyramid is all inexperienced at this role, at the roles that they've been hired to do. And to me, all it says is patience for the fan base. That's what it says. It's going to take time for this all to come together and to work. And unfortunately, it probably all, this is not fair, but it is what it is. It's going to all lay at Will Levis's feet, but it's just going to take time. It's early Bengals with Joe Burrow getting destroyed and getting hurt, and them going like 4-12, I think, one year. Like it's going to take some patience. You don't need to give it a lot of patience. I don't think you should be asking for more than 1 year of patience in the NFL. But I do think the talent and the staff need to grow together, I think.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, everybody's like, well, the Jacksonville passing game sucks so much. Well, it didn't suck for like the first 13 weeks until Trevor Lawrence really got injured. In fact, it was better than the 2022 season. And then he got injured, and it was terrible after he got injured.
Yeah.
He was really injured. And you know me, I'm not a Trevor Lawrence guy, and I think Will Levis is 10 times better than Trevor Lawrence. I really
10 times.
But I'm just joking. But I'm telling you that it's not as bad as what the end of the season left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and that's fine. It's a lot of recency bias, and I understand it, but you really have to dive deep to kind of separate what was actually going on in Jacksonville. But to your point about it being a little slow process, Chad Brinker was on the OTP on Friday, and he dove into kind of, not giving everything away, but dove into the sports medicine side or sports science side. But a lot of his stuff was first off, they 1000% believe in Will Levis. I am convinced that this staff, and Brian Callahan included, like, not just coach speak or not just PR stuff, like, they're truly believe in Will Levis. The second thing is how they talk. He talks about team building being a process. You have to build through the draft. Building through the draft is number one priority, and that's what you got to do. And building through the draft, when you don't have a lot of picks, is going to take time. And they're talking about building out the analytics department. He talked about it. It's right now, view it as a startup, because they're starting and building it from scratch. So this in their minds, they know that this whole process, while they can compete in the AFC South, because the AFC South's not that good, while they feel they can compete, I think that you have to set your proper expectations. Like, the best thing that this team can probably do next year is maybe go 8-8, 9-8, and then build on top of that. I don't think you're going to see an 11 to 12 win team currently. Free agency may change that. The draft may change that, but you have to understand, they understand that it's going to take a year or two. They spoken, what it is today will not be what it is in 3 years. So I think they are looking at a 3-year plan. I think everybody needs to be on board with that.
Yeah, and I do think this division could change quickly. If Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud continue to make strides and Trevor Lawrence is healthy, you could have a very well quarterback division in 2 years if Will Levis takes steps. And I think another top 10 pick, but development from Will Levis. Now we're already into expectation setting before the Super Bowl even happens. But we got all off season to do that. But I do think patience is the right word here. This maybe speaks to why Vrabel should have been fired the year before, in theory. If you want to play that card, I understand. I don't agree, but I understand why you would say that in theory if you're a Titans fan, because then you could have started the clock at that point, right? With a new general manager and a new coach. You probably could have hired Bill Callahan at this time last year. Bill Callahan, Brian Callahan. There, I did it for the first time. So there you go. Make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group as well.
We're going to start in news. It's not
breaking
big news or anything.
Did your other dog kiss the other dog back?
Yeah, the Tennessee Titans, former Tennessee Titans special teams coordinator Craig Ackerman is interviewing for the Buccaneers, which, by the way, sell on the Buccaneers. They hired Liam Cohen as their offensive coordinator, and now maybe possibly hiring Craig Ackerman. Sell. But secondly, just so you guys know, that was the leaping point for Mike Garafolo to report that the Titans are also interviewing Thomas McGahee, or McGahee, I don't know how you pronounce it, for their special teams job, who has been the special teams coordinator for the New York Giants from 2018 to 2023. He took over for Thomas Quinn back in 2018.
That's multiple regimes. Sure. He was kept on through multiple regimes, it sounds like, right? Because Dayball's only in his third year, right? I think so.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so I would have to look at the New York Giants special team rankings for all that kind of stuff, but I don't know anything about the Giants special teams in the big scheme of things.
All right. Well, special thanks to Sinkers Beverages and Kingston Group for supporting you, and all the guys that did all the work. You got you folks down there in Mobile, you and Stoney, of course, JT and Easton, as well as our great sponsors, Lions Ford. Make sure you check them out, of course. If you're looking for a new vehicle, give them a ring. Bluegrass Beverages, all the sponsors, Boomboss Pizza. You guys were great. Shouts to all you guys for all the work that you did down there. Stackingtheinbox.com is a great place to get all of that content if you want to go back and relive all of it. So make sure you do that. And again, stay tuned. Subscribe to the 440 Sports YouTube page. We've got early preseason SEC team rankings up there. We're going to rank the coaches over there. We got a lot of SEC football content for you on the website, so check that out. And some news coming soon about the NFL draft and how we're going to interact with you, the fans, and you, the audience, this year, like we kind of did last year. What do you think of the new makeup here in the background? What do you think? All new. I got that guy who stole money from like poor children in Mississippi off the wall. So
looking good.
So he's gone. There is right here over my shoulder. This right here is an autographed Warren Moon photo in those old Houston Oilers blues. It's pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty awesome. So, all right. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for subscribing. We do appreciate it. You can check out the podcast as well, Football and Other F Words as well. Mike Herndon, by the way, was on Lamestream Sports last week, so check out that episode. A lot of analytics talk in there, so we do appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. For Zach, I am Braden. Have a great week, everybody. We will preview the Super Bowl on Thursday. Talk to you then.